Thank you very much for joining us today. My name's David Mackay and I'm the Policy and Projects Manager at Children in Scotland. Today we're going to be sharing some learning from our Open Kindergarten project, which is an early years family support project that concluded in April 2020. So Open Kindergarten was funded by the European Social Fund and was delivered by a range of partners. Today, we're very lucky to have some of the project partners joining us. They'll be sharing on their knowledge and experience with us as we reflect on the project and think about how this can affect early years policy and practice here in Scotland. We have input from two workers, so we've got one from Norway and one from Scotland. We have a researcher who works on the project, and we'll also be hearing from Clare Simpson from Parenting Across Scotland. So without further ado, could I ask the contributors to introduce themselves today? So Clare, if we could start off with you.
Hi, I'm Clare Simpson. I'm the manager of Parenting Across Scotland, a partnership of charities that work on family support.
And Lena, perhaps you could introduce yourself next.
Hi, I'm Lena Moldestad. I'm a former leader in two family houses in Tromsø, Norway.
Great, thank you. Ruth, would you like to introduce yourself next, please?
Hi, I'm Ruth Dodds. I work for Midlothian SureStar. I'm a development officer and based around all 6 of our centres.
Great, thank you. And Hannah, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Hannah Hale. I'm a research fellow at the Centre for Child Wellbeing and Protection at the University of Stirling.
Great, thank you everyone. Clare, would you like to start telling us a bit of information about what Open Kindergartens actually are?
Okay. Hi, thanks very much. In 2015, I was lucky enough to get a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust travelling fellowship. And I wanted to look at how families are supported in the early years in Scandinavia. And so I travelled to to Sweden, to Denmark and to Norway. And there were a number of things that I looked at. I saw early learning and childcare settings. I saw what are called family centres in Sweden and family houses in Norway. And I was particularly impressed by the model of open kindergartens. It was something that I hadn't really come across before. It started in Sweden and is widely used in Sweden and is also used in Norway and in Finland. In Sweden, it's very often co-located in family centres. In Norway, that would be called family houses. And they're a model where services are co-located. So everything that a parent's doing in a child's early life, you know, there's midwifery at the start, there's child health, and then there is open kindergartens, which are very much parents coming together and being supported by practitioners. And then there's early learning and childcare in those centres. They're aimed at preschool age children. So people have said to me 0 to 6, but for the most part, children are starting nursery, starting early learning and childcare at perhaps 18 months or 2. So they tend to be for younger children. They bring parents and carers and their children together, and they normalise the kind of experience or the problems that parents have, so they feel very much that they're not alone. It enables parents to bring up problems in a safe, kind of protected space, and allows practitioners to observe and interact and pick out any problems, and then they can work with those problems in a non-judgmental, supportive way. And that means that, you know, you've really got early intervention and things happening, providing more help if necessary, or if necessary, moving on to other services. One of the places that I visited was Tromsø in Norway. And while I was there, I met Lena Moldestad, who at that point was the leader of the family house in Tromsø. So Lena, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for being here. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how open kindergartens came about in Norway.
Well, we looked to Sweden, actually. It was in the early 2000s, it started as a project. And it was to develop a model for interaction between those who work for the small children and families to organize coordinated services for them. It was also to promote well-being for children, youngsters, and family, and for early identification of physical, psychological, and social challenges within the family and the child, and also to get easily accessible support and measures. It was important we wanted to strengthen the family's social network and support and strengthen parents in their caring and upbringing role. And also to coordinate, as I said, coordinate the services for the families. And it was important here to organize a meeting place where people live in the local areas. And it was also important that it was a relevant competence among the people who work there. So Open Kindergarten in Family House was this meeting place, and it was for all parents, for everyone.
Thank you. I think that's really important. I think being for all parents is so important. It's a very open, welcoming space. Could you tell us what a typical session would look like in the Open Kindergarten in Tromsø?
In Tromsø, it was, we have tried different things, and the main thing is to get the children to come and play, and also meet other children, and for the parents to meet other parents, to socialize, both children and parents. So the play is the most important thing. And we don't organize the playing that much, but we have singing lessons once a week. And we also have some outside events like trips to the beach or to the nature grounds. And also we have visits from physiotherapist or health nurse or psychological education professionals, and the kindergarten teachers work there. And we tried some different stuff. We also have some activities though, but not too much because the children are so small when they come here.
That's great. I think that actually the play and being outdoors are things that are very much recognised in Scotland as well as being important. So how effective do you think that open kindergartens are as a way of supporting families?
Well, here in Tromsø, it's a lot of international people, because we have a university here, and people from many nations come, and also from other parts of this nation. And it's very important for them to come and meet other people when they come here with small children. It's a place where you can establish a social network. it's of course important for the people who are from here, but because everyone can feel a little bit alone when they are in maternity leave or they're home with a child. A lot of the other children are in kindergartens, so it's nice for them to meet. So I think the networking is really important. And also a lot of families come here to prepare the child and themselves for going to kindergarten. So it's a nice way to come here and just for the parents to look how the child is acting amongst other children. And also, of course, it's important that they can have discussions and talk and support each other. We can see that they support each other. They can talk about different topics that's important for them and that they wonder about. So, and also, of course, we have some theme sessions from different professionals that come and speak or just stay with them in open kindergarten. And they can talk about it like a low threshold. You don't have to have a problem. You just could talk about it.
I think that what you've said there really echoes so much of what we found in Scotland as well, that kind of social networking, and particularly if people are perhaps new coming into, an area, it's really helpful. And yeah, so thank you very much, Lena. I mean, it was wonderful to visit you in Tromsø, and it's wonderful that the relationship has continued and that, we've brought something to Scotland which has many of the benefits that have been seen in Norway. So, we'll look a little bit more now at the Scottish context.
I'm so happy that you have tried this in Scotland as well.
Me too. So when I came back to Scotland, I wrote up my report and discussed ideas with Children in Scotland colleagues. And we made an application to the European Social Fund application, the European Social Fund, Social Innovation Fund, and we were successful in getting some funding initially to look at the feasibility. What would it look like in Scotland? Because obviously Norway and Scotland are very different, both in their policy context and their populations and so on. So Children in Scotland and Parenting Across Scotland worked together and brought in other partners. We wanted 2 practice partners, and we had one from a statutory setting, City of Edinburgh Council, and another from a third sector partner, Midlothian Stirling. And we wanted a university to evaluate the project, and so University of Stirling came along to do that. And in the feasibility stage, we went out and we talked to professionals, we talked to parents, we talked to practitioners, and we talked about what open kindergartens were, what parents needed, what some of the ideas, some of the obstacles were in the UK. And we came up with a report talking about what they were in Norway and Sweden, but what they were in Scotland and what the kind of differences would have to be. And on the basis of that report, we were then asked to apply for phase 2 funding to run 2 pilots.
Great, thank you, Claire. So we're just going to have a little look at the policy and social context of the project here in Scotland, what's happening within the early years in Scotland. So perhaps you'd like to just talk about the first 2 points on the slide and some of the key provisions for families in the early years, looking at the health visiting and early learning childcare expansion.
Yeah, so for quite a while, probably back to 2007, where the Scottish Government came up with the early years framework, there was a recognition that the early years are a really important time in children's and families' lives and are a key point to make a difference, because the difference that is made then enables parents and families to engage with services and so on. So there was some concern at that point that health visiting, that there were not as many contacts as there should be, that there was not as many health visitors to fulfill that. And so one of the things that Scottish Government has done within that time frame is to expand the health visiting workforce and to set up a universal health visiting pathway which has a greater number of contacts, and reinstitute some contacts at key stages in a child's life at 15 months and at 27 to 30 months. So at the minute that has been reinstituted, it's happening. There's an evaluation currently going on. They also looked at a big expansion of childcare. The expansion was initially to 600 hours in 2014, and 1140 was planned for this year. And because of the pandemic, some of the timetables or deadlines for that have been postponed. The early learning in childcare was mostly for children from age 3, which does still leave a gap for many working parents. For most parents, for most children from age 3, but also for some eligible children, families on low incomes from age 2. This has had a very low take up, and there's been some concern over this. And one of the things I think that we think of is that open kindergartens really offer an opportunity for a introduction to childcare for those parents, and a kind of building up of trust and relationships at that point in time. So basically, there's a bit of a gap, because you have midwifery and a great antenatal pathway, and I think it's 24-week check that people get offered a baby box, and that's a universal offer. It's got a very high take up, over 90%. Then there's the health visiting pathway. And, really, by the age of 1, that's really dropping off. And between 1 and 3, when most children enter nursery, there's not a lot of support for parents. So the open kindergarten is one of the, one option that could really help with this.
Great. So Claire, we've seen quite a lot of investment from Scottish Government in terms of things like the baby box and the expansion of early learning and childcare. However, I guess one of the key questions is about relationship-based support for parents and families. Obviously, there's some of that with the health visiting, but it's not as intensive as perhaps some parents might need.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the relationship between practitioner and parent is really important, and it's also what enables that peer support. We know that, there is not really enough funding in the system, in local authorities, in the third sector. And so in many ways, actually utilising the practitioner to work with peers means that support is there for a longer amount of time. It's there when people need it, beyond the actual session of open kindergarten as well. We have in Scotland as well got rising levels of child poverty. Even before the pandemic, 1 in 4 children in Scotland was living in poverty, and there were rising levels of inequality. Even before the pandemic, I suppose, insecure jobs and lack of jobs meant, and very low welfare levels meant that far too many children were living in poverty. There's been a number of promising policy developments from the Scottish Government. The Independent Care Review, which was set up to look at children going into care, and which was very heavily influenced by care experienced people themselves. Half the people on the review were from care experience, had lived experience of the care system. And while this is about care, One of the things that the final report really identified very strongly is that we've got very high levels of children going into care. And this is very, very strongly linked to poverty. You're, I think, 5 times more likely, according to Paul Bywater's report, to go into care if you're living in a family in poverty. And what the care review, some of the findings of that were that actually, in order to look at supporting families, we really have to look at making sure that families initially have enough to live on. And that we have to do good family support so that we're keeping families together. I think some people were sort of slightly surprised by the findings of the care review because it was talking about what a care system is going to be like. But what it was actually saying is that there needs to be really good prevention and early intervention so that we don't have so many people, so many children being taken from their families, and that we have to support families in order to do that.
That's great. And then a really positive thing that is currently on the agenda here in Scotland is the incorporation of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. Obviously, your visit to Scandinavia, you saw open kindergartens in action, and they're very heavily influenced by a UNCRC approach, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, everywhere that I travelled and practitioners I talked to were very, very aware of the UNCRC. One thing that I particularly remember was it was my first day in Sweden, and I was talking to people about, Scotland and about Sweden, and then they were asking me questions and saying they could not believe that smacking or hitting a child was not against the law in Scotland. And they kept having to check with me. Sweden was the first country in the world to do this in 1976. And they kept saying to me, surely that can't be right. You must have got it wrong. And I was saying, no, I am right. So we've been pretty far behind the curve in many ways. And very recently, that law has changed. I mean, actually this month. And it's fantastic that it has changed, but we need to be more proactive, and we need to be comparing ourselves, not with other countries in the UK where they're actually not doing so well either, but we need to be comparing ourselves with the best in Europe. And, Scandinavia and Netherlands and some other countries, perhaps Germany, I might add to that at the minute, I think, are leaders in that. So we actually should be looking at that. But it has been introduced to the Scottish Parliament now that UNCRC should be incorporated. It's a strong bill, and it goes as far as we can do within the devolution settlement.
Great, thanks very much, Claire. So you'd highlighted the Open Kindergarten Phase 2 in your last a bit earlier in the presentation. So at this point, we after the feasibility study, we decided to pilot the Open Kindergarten model at 2 different earlier settings. So Ruth is here from Midlothian Sure Start. That was what Mayfield Family Learning Centre was one of the sites that we focused on. We also piloted it at Granton Early Years Centre, which is a local authority setting based in the City of Edinburgh Council local authority. So we worked with them for 12 months, and at each of the sites they delivered twice weekly drop-in sessions for parents with children aged 0 to 3 years, and they were led by a family support worker at each site. Similar to the Open Kindergarten in Sweden and Norway, the sessions were parent-led and they were unstructured. You didn't have a rigid structure at Midlothian or at Granton. And both sites did outreach work in the community and in parents' homes to really encourage parents to get involved and engage with the group, which was a key part of their work. So we're lucky to have Ruth Dodds here from Mayfield Family Learning Centre. So Ruth, it would be good if you could just tell us a little bit more about how you experienced Open Kindergarten. So can you tell us how you set up the Open Kindergarten sessions at Midlothian?
Hi, yeah, so I had the exciting job of setting up the group. To start off with, Midlothian have a project during the summer holidays where families can come in, and there's a range of activities and hot meals and things like that served throughout the summer. So I supported at this project, but it was a way to sort of meet families in the community and build up those relationships, which I suppose then led on to the outreach work where I think there was a lot of sort of home visits and trying to bridge the gap between coming into the centre and just so that they had someone that they could speak with, and yeah, so we done that. So that was a lot of home visits and just building up those relationships. And then we spoke with health visitors and social work team and things like that, just to sort of do, if they could identify any families that they could refer into the service.
So these were families that might have been struggling a bit or needed a bit of additional support?
Yeah, there was a whole sort of different, I suppose, different reasons that families were referred in. Quite a lot for isolation, which I think sort of picks up with what Lena was saying earlier, was that maybe families that didn't know anyone else that had children of a similar age, that they felt quite isolated. They maybe didn't have money to go into groups that you would have to pay for and things like that. So yeah, just a whole host of different reasons. I did design a poster and put it up in sort of the local dentist and the doctor's surgery. But I think I found that posting it up on Facebook and using social media was how we reached more families. So we posted it on like community pages on Facebook, and I think that was how we got quite a lot of families through.
Great. And was it a bit of a challenge at the start, sort of presenting Open Kindergarten to people, because it's very parent-led and unstructured? So how did you go about?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd done groups before that were maybe more structured and more, you know, this week we're going to sing this, or we're going to talk about this sort of discussion. So it was something a bit different. I think I was a bit apprehensive with the first few sort of sessions that we done. I think because you worry about like, what are people going to talk about? But I think parents felt quite relaxed coming in, and that they could open up and chat to each other. And I think that was something that came back in the feedback, was that they didn't feel pressured to sort of talk about a particular topic. So I think that was really good. And yeah, and I think it helped with people sort of feeling a bit more relaxed and a bit more natural discussions rather than it being forced.
Great. And just leading on from that, you talked about the natural discussions that happened. I guess that leads on to about Open Kindergarten being very parent-led. So can you tell us some of the key issues that parents wanted support with, and how you identified this and delivered this support?
I think one of the first things that parents discussed, I think it was just that there happened to be a few parents with children that were of the age that they were going to start like baby-led weaning. So the conversation was talking about like what different snacks to have. But I think as the conversation sort of progressed, I think the parents were quite worried about choking and things like that. So rather than it being about what to feed their babies, it was about what would happen if one of the children choked. So we were able to source a first aider to come in and do like a very basic first aid with all the parents and show them how to what to do if babies were choking and things like that. And then from there we done we got lots of different foods to sort of trial and had all the children sort of tasting things, and families sort of sharing ideas and sharing recipes and things, which was really good.
So it's a really nice kind of natural progression rather than feeling forced or.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I think parents, I think that was why the uptake was probably quite good, was because parents, it came from their own discussions and they were interested to then come to the sort of more structured sessions that were maybe about first aid or weaning, or there was quite a lot of talk about sort of behaviour and sort of things like that. So we were able to get people in to talk about behaviour and about speech and language and ways to sort of encourage speech. And I think that was quite a nice way to sort of bring in lots of singing and to do different things like that, and stories. And
great. And I think the image that we've got on the screen at the moment is from a messy play session that you had at the Open Kindergarten. Is that correct? There was
yeah. So I think it was Play Midlothian came in and they set up, it was for sort of 3 weeks that they done it, and they trialled lots of sort of different messy play. And I think parents were quite interested in doing it, but maybe not in their homes, because obviously the mess and things like that. So they were quite happy to come along and sort of have that environment where kids could really explore and get quite creative. So it was good.
and we've got some images now on here from some of the participants in the sessions. Can you just tell us about how parents and children benefited from the sessions and what you think the key successes of the project were?
I think for everyone, for the children and the parents, I think the sort of isolation that quite a lot of people were feeling. So I think the benefit really was to come into a safe, secure environment and have that sort of free space that their children could play with each other, that they could talk to one another. I think some of the parents with older children were really good at supporting the sort of first-time parents, and that led to parents would bring in old bags of clothes and they would swap clothes or swap toys. And I think we had the back door open, so children were able to go out and use the garden. And I think, I suppose from an organisational point of view, we had a good sort of uptake in different programmes. So just now we've got 2 of the children actually featured on the slide. They're now in a Good Time to Be 2 placement in the centre. So that was quite a nice transition. I think the kids, because they were used to coming in, felt quite comfortable in the setting. But I think, yeah, it was just nice to have that sort of environment and a nice safe place to come in and chat to each other. We did have a parent come in while she was pregnant, and we've reopened the centre for groups, and she's now come back with the wee one who's going to be turning 1 next month. So that's really nice to sort of have that transition of her coming in and being able to bring the baby in when she first had him, and yeah, just a really lovely transition for her.
Great, thank you very much for telling us a bit more about that. We're now going to hear from Dr. Hannah Hale, who'll tell us a bit about the findings from the evaluation. Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, David. Just briefly to give an overview of how we went about conducting the evaluation. It was a range of methods that we used. So we we had a survey, a questionnaire, and a wellbeing web, which we gave to parents at Ruth did a lot of this work, gave to parents at the beginning when they first came to the sessions, and that gave a sense of, captured a sense of their well-being, how they perceived it, and then did the same again 4 to 5 weeks later to see if it was making a difference. And the survey sort of captured the demographics and their sort of perceptions of open kindergarten. We also did interviews with practitioners and parents in both sites. Overall, it was actually very interesting listening to Lena then talk about the experiences in Scandinavia and some of the impacts, because a big question and something that's very interesting for us was when applying something like open kindergarten in Scotland in quite a different sociocultural context, how will it be taken up? How useful is it? How will it be experienced? And I'm sure Ruth would agree, or that's the sense that we've got already from what Ruth was saying then, was that it really was, it had a very positive impact and was taken up very with great, there was a big need for it, and it was fulfilling that need. It was person-centered and relaxed and informal, and Ruth has described how it was parent-led and how she went about achieving that. The open door policy was very important because it contributed to the means of enabling it to be relaxed and informal, because parents could turn up if they wanted to and when they wanted to. So there was a 2-hour slot twice a week and at different times, so it sort of coordinated for the parents with the different needs in terms of their babies or children's ages, and they didn't have to stay for the whole 2 hours. They could turn up in the middle of it or just towards the end, and they were still, each time they were received with a very warm welcome. It was also free, and some costs might, there could be some costs incurred in travel and some of the pragmatics around that, but the fact that it was free, that it was conveyed to us that was very important. But the practitioner's approach was overall a big finding, was that's crucial, and it was interesting. It was interesting getting a sense from the practitioners how they went about fine-tuning the approach. And I think they, and as a team, we got a sense that there was a sense towards the end that it was sort of a package that you could put together, that you could present to practitioners, that would enable the same and even more to be achieved.
One of the things,
yeah, carry on.
Sorry, one of the things that came out from our discussions with practitioners in Norway and Sweden was this term professional friend, and the fact that the people delivering open kindergarten, the family support workers, had a really important role to play. They, were there to give advice and support, but it was in a really informal, friendly way. And I think that came across in the sessions that were delivered at Midlothian, Shore Start, and in Granton as well.
Yeah, that's really useful, David, because it's that sort of exemplifies how and why it stood out and was something quite different to what parents were otherwise experiencing. And Ruth mentioned the things that she was needing to do at the beginning in order to try to bring parents in and sort of get parents to try it, because it was something unusual. And they conveyed to us in the interviews in particular that where it was different was that they really didn't feel as though these professionals, the practitioners, were telling them what to do. Instead, it wasn't judgmental, it was safe, and again, it was parent-led, so they could They were considered the individuals with the experience. They knew their children, and it supported it supported that sort of those dynamics and that understanding.
Great. And then just in terms of some of the key successes from the project, perhaps you can talk us through those.
Yeah. I mean, I've touched already on how Open Kindergarten filled that service gap, and a very common theme was a big concern around mental health. Parents were very open about some of the challenges that they were experiencing, and Ruth mentioned already that sense of feeling, I think you did as well, David, that sense of feeling overwhelmed and isolated in their own homes. And they considered Open Kindergarten something that provided that source of relief from that situation, not just because it was something that addressed some of directly addressed some of the factors that would be contributing to that sense of being isolated because of that interaction with other parents, but also the knowledge that it was there, the sense that they had something out there that was there to support them, and that they had it there to go to. So if it was only once a week that they could come, just knowing, just kind of, sorry, we also did a diary, and within the diary, the parent talks about, I just need to get to Wednesday. Today's a better day because it's an Open Kindergarten day. And then the rest of the week, it helped the rest of the week that it was there. It also, it provided, it really supported that play and interaction for children. And the age range was a lovely thing to pick up on, that the fact that parents were there with the children and with babies, it felt safe and it felt relaxed. So parents were having that interaction with each other, and the peer support was very much there. But the children also had the experience of being able to interact with each other.
Because
maybe I could come in there a minute, Anna.
Yeah.
I think there's important opportunities for children to play and interact, because we've talked about it being parent-led, but I think in as much as it's parent-led, it's probably also very much child-led. So we see what the child's doing and the parents interact and respond to that, and the practitioners work within that framework and are able perhaps to draw the parent's eye to something that they maybe hadn't realised, like, when they're playing, children will tend to be very repetitive. And sometimes some parents might find that slightly irritating and not realising that there's a purpose and a child development aspect of that.
Great, thanks, Claire.
That's a really good point, actually. Ruth could probably expand on it a little bit more, because it really chimes with the ethos of the Mayfield Centre, doesn't it? A Midlothian Sure Start overall, that it's child-centred, that when you place the child as the focal point, as the priority, then so many other things fall into place.
Yeah, definitely. I think for Midlothian Sure Start, we're very child focused, even though we are a family sort of learning centre. Everything is sort of designed around the children, and but I think I was just thinking about the sort of the benefits that parents were getting, and I think they maybe mentioned that the sense of sort of respite as well, even though they were still there with their children in the room and interacting with them, but there was a sort of sense that they could still sort of relax and have that sort of respite, and the children were quite free to go and play maybe at one corner of the room, or to go outside with them as well. So
yeah, there's something about doing that collectively when you're seeing other parents actually relaxing and enjoying talking to each other. There's something when you're sharing that experience, it can make it even easier to do it, when otherwise life is so filled with caring for that child and everything that's involved in that. The final point on this slide is that there's the skills and the experience of practitioners being vital to building the relationships with the parents. And it was an interesting combination, because of it being parent-led, like we've talked about. It's an interesting combination of the the practitioners needing the skills and that experience and those skills being so important for the practitioners and what they bring to open kindergarten, but also that it's very much the emphasis, however, is on the parents themselves, and so it's the practitioner responding to the parents as opposed to approaching the context as an individual where you can impart your knowledge and your skills and your that's again where it really, for parents, they conveyed that it really stood out to them as being something, you know, and just the basics of enabling the practitioners are crucial for enabling that environment that parents walk into where they feel safe and they feel welcome. And parents talked about that a lot. You know, I just walk in through the door and I, you know, it's like they breathe this sigh of relief. They sort of did that out loud in the interview, and it was the way that the practitioners greeted them at the door, and then the atmosphere that they felt, and once they were in the building, that was crucial.
They're quite different skills as well, working with directly with children, and working with families, working with parents and carers alongside children. So and one of the nice things that came out in the evaluation for me was that many parents identified open kindergarten as a kind of home from home, which I thought was really, really lovely.
That was really lovely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
If I can say something here.
Yes, Lena.
Because it's nice to hear that we have talked about the same thing in Norway. It's been a discussion and the important role of the practitioner. So it's hard to explain what they do, but it's really important just to support both the social networking going on, also looking at the child and getting the, as you said, Claire, the parents to see new sides of the baby or the children. And parental guidance is a very important knowledge of the professional. And also I see that the parents, some of the parents may trust the professional system. It's a doorstep or a step to trusting the professionals.
Absolutely, a great stepping stone for trusting professionals and moving on to other supports.
Can I just say a tiny thing, David? And that's sort of from what Lena said, and I really remember going to Norway, and it's very funny in some ways when you can't speak the language, because in some ways, sometimes you almost see more because you have to observe other signs. And what I could really observe with the practitioners in that room was sometimes it was really hard to tell who were the practitioners and who were the parents. And actually, that doesn't sound like a very big point, but I think it is, because what it's saying is they're not leading. They are leading, but in a very quiet, unobtrusive way. And they have to work very hard themselves to see these signs. And it's just, I think it's about that practitioner and approach, and it's very much about relationships. And I think what Lena said was really, really important, that if you establish that trust, it enables relationships and asking for help in other contexts as you go on, which is so important.
Thank you. That's a great observation. Okay, so Claire, we thought it'd be good to just have a quick look at the policy reflections from the learnings from the project. So how do you think open kindergarten approach fits with early years support in Scotland? Oh, you're on mute.
Hey dear. Right. I think it fits very well. I think that, you know, there is a gap in terms of actually the support for families. I think to some extent this has been recognised by Scottish Government in the work that they've done on quality within early learning and childcare. There are a number of modules for practitioners, and one of them is on parental engagement. There's a big look at family engagement and at parental engagement, at family learning. And, you know, that is great, but actually I think it needs perhaps a little bit more. And what we've seen here is that Open Kindergarten does offer that. We also know that within the legislation, what they did was they said there would be so many free hours for children from the age of 3 and 4, and that the 2-year-old offer, they would, you know, offer this hours to children, to families who are on low incomes. It's had a very low take-up. And one provision of the legislation that's not understood very often or not used, and I think the Scottish Government have been looking at using it more, it says either these hours or such other support as may be appropriate. And we know that for many families, you know, whether if they're not working, maybe they don't feel they need childcare. Actually, I think Open Kindergarten is this other support, and it enabled parents to come along and get that support. But also, if it's in an ELC setting, if it's in an early learning and childcare setting, that enables them to become familiar with the setting, with the practitioners, and enables them a smoother transition and them to feel more comfortable that that is a good place for their child to go, somewhere that they can trust.
Great. And so the opportunities that ELC expansion offers in terms of embedding the approaches we've seen through Open Kindergarten, how do you think what opportunities does it present?
I think it presents the opportunities to making sure that parents feel very comfortable with that approach. They can engage with the professionals, they can make the most of the opportunities that are on offer. One of the government guidance documents is about new builds. It's about, you know, where local authorities need extra provision and they build new nurseries, and it's called Space to Grow. And within that, it talks about having family rooms. And again, you know, those family rooms could be used for interaction with parents once their child is at nursery, but you could be doing this before, and it builds up that relationship and that trusted friend, the professional friend, to enable you to feel happy. Because I do think that while there's so much evidence, academic evidence and so on, that actually early learning and childcare is very good for children, parents don't always feel that themselves, and they trust their own friends and their families a lot more. And if they can actually come into the settings and see that they are learning something and their children are learning something, or that not even learning, but you know, I mean, there is an emphasis on learning when people talk about numbers and reading, but it's actually play and enjoying. If they can start to see the value of those things, then I think it's really helpful.
Great, thank you, Claire. And then just, I guess, in terms of practice reflections, we thought this would be quite a useful thing to highlight for early years practitioners or early years managers who are watching this video. So I guess it's something that we wanted to highlight, and for professionals to go away and have a think about themselves, either individually or as part of their staff team. So here are a couple of questions. How confident and skilled is your team in working with parents and carers? And how could this be improved in your setting? So I think that's a really important question, don't you, Claire? And we've seen the great approach from Midlothian Sure Start and how they're working with the whole family. And then the second point is, how confident are you in your knowledge of UNCRC and in rights-based approaches? So that's really important with the introduction of UNCRC that we expect to come in as part of the incorporation bill.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there is quite a lot of interest and not concern, but, you know, people realise that they're going to have to look at children's rights impact assessments and so on, and how their practice evolves.
Great. So we'll just, I think that sort of really brings us to the end of the presentation today. So I hope you've enjoyed that. You can find out more information about the Open Kindergarten project on the Children in Scotland website, and that has a link to the University of Stirling's evaluation of the project, and more information about the Open Kindergarten approach. We also have Clare, a link here to Clare Simpson's supporting families in the early years in Scandinavia that can be accessed through this link on the screen here. And finally, just want to say thank you very much for joining us, and a big thank you to everyone who took part in this discussion. So thank you to Hannah, thank you to Lena, thank you to Ruth, and thank you to Clare.